Hey, welcome back to the stash. As I'm sure you all know by now, the current volume of The Amazing Spider-Man is notoriously known for ruining any and every character it touches. And of course, last issue was no exception, with Zeb Wells' second attempt at ruining Ben Reilly. Unlucky for us fans, it continues here with the latest installment of this series with The Amazing Spider-Man issue 48. But just before we get into that, I wanted to take a quick second to thank you all for the recent support on the channel. Life keeps getting in the way of me posting more, however I really want to try to make more content for you guys whenever I can. We're also trying to reach 1,400 subscribers, and with your help I know we can do it. So if you like Spidey or just comic content in general, feel free to stick around and maybe hit that subscribe button. We also have a channel membership for a very small price, get a bunch of cool little perks there as well, but that's just there in case you wanted to go above and beyond with your support of the channel. But I think that's enough self-promotion and it's time to get back into the video. Now, in case you've missed the previous uploads, lucky for you there is a playlist. I'll go over a quick recap from the book. Betty Brant has been searching for any evidence to prove her husband Ned Leeds innocent after his latest stint as the Hobgoblin. After months of digging, she's finally uncovered the location of the Winkler Device, the machine used to brainwash Ned. Hot on the trail with the piece of evidence guaranteed to free her husband, Betty was cornered by goons of the man who brainwashed Ned in the first place, RODERICK KINGSLEY. But being friends with Peter Parker has its perks, namely having Spider-Man swoop in to save the day. After making quick work of the goons, Spidey and Betty were able to locate the Winkler Device. Unfortunately, Betty isn't the only one who wants the brain machine. Spider-Man's wayward clone CHASM and his girlfriend HALLOWS EVE seem to have plans for the device. What's more, the duo has a new unlikely ally and therapist, Queen Goblin. Our story begins with a flashback depicting how Ben, Janine, and Kafka teamed up, and it's almost set up like couples therapy, which is very fitting for Zeb Wells. Anyway, Janine explains that at Ben's core, he's just still not whole even after everything they've been through. This leads to Queen Goblin saying she has a device to fix everything, but they just need to forget about their complicated past and work together. Because doesn't she look like someone you can trust?
Hey pal, you just blowing from Stupid Town?
We go back to present day where us the reader falls victim to another retcon by Zeb Wells. So a quick little history lesson here. Originally, RODERICK KINGSLEY used the Winkler Device on Ned Leeds to brainwash him into believing he was the real Hobgoblin. However, now it turns out that Queen Goblin brainwashed Kingsley in the first place for those events to unfold, therefore meaning the machine was hers all along. Now, I don't know about you, but none of this really sits right with me, and I just really want someone to sort of explain to me why Kafka is still evil, or what the point of making her evil was in the first place. I seriously have zero clue for what it does for her character, and she already gave Norman his sins back, or so we think. Is this how they're gonna justify Peter becoming the 13-year-old edgy Green Goblin again? Kafka used the device on him and erased his memory of it, so this whole plot is driven by someone who was pointlessly made a villain rather than, you know, like Norman Osborn, the original Green Goblin? And I understand how some people might dislike the Arkham Asylum copy of Ravencroft, but I really enjoyed the old stories with it, and I really liked Kafka as a character, but then they killed her, and they pretended they didn't, and then they did it again, and then turned her into a goblin. Like, what is the point of this? After discovering the truth, Betty, filled with rage, charges at Queen Goblin because... No, actually, why? Like, I get that you're angry, but why? Like...
You serious?
Do you genuinely, what do you think is going to happen here? Like, what do you seriously think is going to happen with you, a human, charging at this Queen Goblin?
Not a great plan.
Lucky for Betty, Spider-Man remembers he's supposed to be the hero of the story and Webb throws her into a wall. Ben jumps into the chair, ready for the treatment, and Queen Goblin pretty much manipulates him and Janine even more and gets Hallows Eve to keep Spider-Man and Betty busy to allow her time to work on Ben. Now, why these two thought making deals or taking therapeutic advice from a woman with red skin and horns is completely beyond me. Like, not to stereotype, but literally the last thing these two did is make a deal with a demonic woman calling herself the Goblin Queen, and that all went to shit terribly. And once they're past the fallout of that, the very next thing they do is make a deal with a different demonic woman calling herself the Queen Goblin. Make it make sense.
It'd be funny if it weren't so pathetic. No, what the heck, I'll laugh anyway.
Now, just as things are about to proceed, Kafka goes on a little rant about her and Ben's history that he has no recollection of. She explains how it's pretty much his fault she's now like this, and it's time for some good old-fashioned revenge. Wow, who would have guessed this was gonna happen, am I right, guys? Spidey and Hallows Eve continue to go back and forth, with each plea from Spider-Man falling on deaf ears until Betty Brant steps up and basically just repeats what Peter was saying the whole time, but for some reason, Hallows Eve believes her instead and then gets a sucker punch by Betty, allowing Spidey to go and save Ben. As he goes off, Betty stays to warn Janine about the dangers of constantly using all your energy just to try to fix the person you love, leaving her with something to think about. Peter jumps in and saves Ben by interrupting the treatment. This leads to Pete now having to fight Queen Goblin. Now while that goes on in the background, Ben and Janine, I guess, now feel more neutral about Peter and just leave the scene altogether. Then as Kafka is slowly losing consciousness from the finishing blow dealt by Spider-Man, she leaves a small hint of mystery in the air. I'm guessing she was going to reveal that the machine could have actually worked if the person behind it obviously had the right intentions, which she clearly did not have, but there's like 1,000 solutions to Ben's problem that have been plaguing him for so long now, and it's just stupid that they went to this extreme with trying to fix it.
What's the point?
Now, very surprisingly, one of the very few positive things I can really say about this comic includes the small intimate scene between Janine and Ben Reilly. After, like, all the shit we've been through with Pete and MJ and even Black Cat, even the way that these two have had been so out of character for the longest of time, I guess it's just nice to see them in a way get a happy ending and a happy beginning in a sense too, to whatever's next for them. Ben's finally moved forward in the sense of his hatred for Peter, and maybe this can be the start of him and Janine's redemption. You know, like at first when I was reading all the Spider-Man books, the Clone Saga was something that I was a bit fearful for, mostly because of the general consensus around it, but as I read it, I started to enjoy it in ways of Ben Reilly being a really good character, and I just really hope that one day he can get back to that 90s version of him, especially, like I've mentioned many times in my videos, the brotherly bond him and Pete shared, where they were just acting like two brothers, and in a way he was going to be the Uncle Ben to him and Mary Jane's daughter, which never happened, of course, because, you know, Ben died, the daughter was a miscarriage, and Peter and MJ had one more day, so now we got Paul. Now our story ends with the setup for the next big story arc presented by Zeb Wells. The Sinister Six, after their big loss against the Living Brain way back in the series, are now ready to take revenge on it and plan to burn Oscorp to the ground. I guess, like, for the first time ever in this series, I actually have some positive things to say about this, which is crazy.
Get this man to a hospital, now! What?
Firstly, I really like the artwork. I thought it was very dynamic, especially the action scenes. And the artist is pretty good, and I believe that they've been doing the last few issues of this story, and I wish that they could stay and do more, but probably going to go back to John Romita Jr. soon, which I'm not looking forward to. He's clearly thrown in the towel with this series. I'm not sure if it's just because he doesn't even like it himself, or he's just given up in general, but yeah. Now, another thing I really liked in this issue was how the Winkler device managed to not get destroyed, which means Spider-Man actually won in this issue. It's been so long for me to be able to say that, but he not only won in the combat aspect by able to, you know, easily take care of Kafka, but he also was able to win in what he was actually trying to accomplish throughout these two issues. It's such a weird feeling seeing him actually do somewhat good, so at least we have that for this one issue, because something tells me things are going to get much, much worse with whatever they're going to do next with the Goblin Spider and the Sinister Six story. Overall, though, this story is still not that good. Its foundation is built on several characters acting like a bunch of morons, and just them clearly not thinking when deciding to trust a maniac who looks like a goblin. A lot of this book was hard to read because of how tedious and boring it is at times, and it feels like every step they take forward, they jump back 50. Like, sure, in this issue, Spider-Man was more competent than usual and didn't get insulted every 2 seconds, but, you know, the step backwards is going to be this shitty story they're going to have to slug through for the next several months, with Spider-Man becoming the Green Goblin again, just so he can fight the Sinister Six, and it's just going to be such a big mess and a waste of time, all for a story that no one's going to remember in the next year, not maybe even the next 6 months. Maybe Marvel should just use the Winkler device as a way to justify how out of character Peter has been during this entire volume, because we seriously need some sort of damage control, because in lots of ways it's just gone on too far. Now, in many ways this issue was better, but that's not really saying much when you're stuck in the worst era of Spider-Man comics, with it looking like it's going to get much worse very soon.